you for joining us for today's Day of Mourning special session of COVID. Great.
And we have Nora too. Good.
That's great. We've had our speakers join even 10 or 15 minutes after the beginning before. So then you see us singing and dancing, but it's great. I'm glad you're able to join, Nora. So Dorothy's actually going to host today, but I thought I would take the opportunity first to welcome everybody and acknowledge that it is a special day. So it is the National Day of Mourning for workers killed or injured on the job. And I wanted to read OCAL's statement from our president and CEO. And then I would like to do a short moment of silence if we could all stand up and people could turn their cameras on and we can share the moment of honoring those who have been injured and killed at work. So every year on this day, we honor the memory of lives lost due to workplace deaths and acknowledge lives forever altered by illness and injury caused by workplace conditions. Despite gains made the past few decades, deaths have not stopped. On-the-job injuries and debilitating work-related illnesses occur all too frequently. The theme of this year's Day of Mourning is Know Your Rights, and at OCAL, one of our priorities is to help empower workers through knowledge. In many cases, the most vulnerable and lowest paid workers are at the greatest risk and don't always know their rights and the responsibilities of their employers. When they know they can refuse unsafe work, request workplace inspections, and get safety standards and regulations enforced, better working conditions result. Knowledge is the first step in protecting workers. We are proud to serve workers in Ontario and support their right to a safe and healthy workplace. Together with advocates, employers, and partners, we will continue to strive for fairness and justice for injured workers and for bereaved families of those who have lost their lives. There is still much work to be done. Thanks. I'm going to stop sharing so we can maybe see each other. And as I said, I think we should do a moment of silence just for 30 seconds while we think about people that we know or people that we know go to work that we're worried about. Oh, I have to tilt my computer. So please join me. Oh, I have to go further back. Obviously, we didn't rehearse this. So, yeah, just a few seconds to think about things. Okay, thank you very much for joining in that. And now I'm going to turn over the hosting to Dorothy Wigmore, who is our occupational health coordinator on several projects at OCAL and a longtime worker advocate and activist. So Dorothy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Val, and I'm pleased to be here. And we do have a guest speaker, but I'm going to intrude on her time a little bit to go over something that I've put together, partly updated, about the history of this day, partly because I was at the very first one, and one of the people who inspired this was the person who got me into health and safety. So if I want to share my screen, I'm just going to. And I'm hoping that that is visible. Val, you're going to have to.
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, I'm just trying to shrink things here. Oops. So I'm trying to make sure that I've got this little other screen in a place where I won't be bothered by it. So I've just been reminded in going over some of the stuff about the phrase from back in 1987 around the Day of Mourning that we are all canaries in today's workplace. And I think given what Nora Loretta is going to talk about, this is an important theme. So So the idea for the Day of Mourning on April 28th was the brainchild of two union health and safety activists, Colin Lambert here on the left and Ray Sentes. These pictures are taken from a video called The Day of Mourning, The Untold Story that was done in 2017. It explains a bit with Colin's memory of how the day started. Just to put it in context, Colin was a miner. He was the health and safety person at the Steelworkers Local 6500 in Sudbury. And through that, I got introduced to health and safety, and both of us ended up taking a hygiene degree. And Colin ended up at the Canadian Union of Public Employees as their health and safety director for many years, starting in 1982 or 3. Ray Sentes then was a University of Regina political science prof who also had been a worker on construction sites, and that's what killed him at the age of 56 when he died of asbestosis in 2000. So what they were really sort of upset about was the fact that so-called fallen police officers and firefighters were getting these public events with all kinds of pomp and ceremony. Whereas Dick Kerr, who's one of the people I thought about a minute or two ago, was a health and safety activist also in Sudbury, and he'd worked with Colin at INCO. And Dick was one of the other people who influenced me in terms of going into health and safety. And he died on the job in 1986. I still remember getting the phone call. He had gone in, thanks to the bonus system at INCO, to an area that was known for rock burst dangers. And that was what caused his death. And his funeral was not a public affair. So Colin, this is a picture more the way I remember him from when we worked together. In '83 at the Canadian Union of Public Employees, he floated this idea of a special day of recognition for workers killed and injured on the job to be held on May 1st, which was celebrated as May Day in Europe and elsewhere. And as he told me in 1990 when I talked to him about this, he said he was talking about how workers are the canaries, the frontline protection for all of us. And his idea was days of preventive action for workers that will be recognized by society in general. So the Health and Safety Committee endorsed the idea. There was all kinds of things going on. CUPE in 1984, this is CUPE's convention, not the CLC's. Delegates supported the proposal and then went off and started negotiating things like lowered flags and moments of silence. So it was in 1986 that the CLC started talking about this, CUPE resolutions, requests, etc. And the CLC was the organization that chose April 28th to coincide with the date of Ontario's first workers' compensation law that passed in 1914. The first day of mourning was held at the CLC convention in Toronto that year. I was there. I remember this. It is not 1984. And the resolution that was passed called it a day to mourn for the dead and fight for the living. And the first poster, as far as I know, is the first poster that used that theme with the canary. And for those who have been seeing 1984 is when it started, I was actually able to find my convention proceedings from 1986. And right at the very beginning, Richard Mercier talks about observing for the first time the annual day of mourning for workers killed and injured on the job, and how April 28th was chosen. So it's 1990, 91. At CUPE, there's this poster with the canary being the in this little container being what coal miners used to take into the coal mines, because the canary would conk out first before the workers did if there was methane gas or other things that were going to harm the workers, and that hopefully the coal miners would have time to get out of the situation. So it's an early warning signal. And so there was this talk about in the materials that we developed that year, April 28th being this year-round series of public events, broad public recognition, and the potential for a day for preventive action for workers that will be recognized by society in general. And this sort of symbol of worker health and safety, the canary. And so there was this really wonderful campaign that QPBC came up with called Spot the Hazard, where these stickers in varying sizes, up to about 6 inches, would be put on various hazards that people found in their workplace on inspections, noted down on an inspection checklist, and health and safety committees would then it was a very visible sign of hazards, and health and safety committees would then take these on. There was campaigns then for a government day of recognition, and bargaining for a moment's silence at 11 o'clock. So in 91, Rod Murphy, who was an NDP member from Northern Manitoba, actually got a private member's bills passed through Parliament that named the 28th as a day of mourning, with this fancy proclamation for persons killed or injured at work. And so it's now recognized across the country, whether it's government, municipalities, workplaces, unions, and in various ways. So one of the fascinating things for me has been these memorials that have sprung up across the country. There's examples here from St. John, from Abbotsford in British Columbia. I threw in the Hamilton one, Val. There's a firefighters monument in Saskatoon. For people in the Toronto area, there's this from Hogs Hollow, which is which was in the north part of Toronto, and a number of people died building the tunnel. The Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety actually has these and more on the webpage, and Fast Eddie, as he was called, Ed Thomas, actually wrote a book about these kinds of monuments. So in Canada, there were sort of new themes and symbols over the years. This is from the Westray Monument. These are different posters that people had came up with. And in this, the last one here is from a walk that's held every year here in Winnipeg, where I am at the moment, called the Leaders Walk, where the workers of tomorrow join with unions and people in the community to walk from the Union Center to the legislature for a ceremony. And so this idea has spread around the world, and I'm just going to show you some of these amazing posters. Lynn Fiatro, I saw, was joining us, and she wondered about dead, sort of lions, dead ends. That's an example of people doing it, I believe, in Japan one year. So these are just some of the kinds of things that people have put out, mostly in the mid-2000s. These days, we don't have much in the way of statistics, and I'm not going to deal with them very much at all. These are the latest that are available through on a national basis. I just want to remind people, whatever statistics we're talking about, Irving Selikoff, the wonderful doctor who looked into and made connections between asbestos and the harm that it was doing to so many workers, he talked about how statistics are people with the tears wiped away. And the other thing to remember is that, especially when we look at workers' comp data, they're only accepted claims. There's much more likely for occupational diseases, musculoskeletal things, and other injuries and diseases. And for those of you who get the PDF version of this, Sean Tucker at the University of Regina has been doing yearly reports that analyze the numbers and make recommendations about how to deal with the data. It doesn't appear he's done one this year yet. So this year, the Know Your Rights, Use Tools, Defend Our Wins was what the CLC came up with, this little candle graphic. Linda Silas, for example, from the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions, has tied the pandemic to the Day of Mourning. And this is just an example of one of the posters that's being used this year happens to be the UFCW. Just in the States, what's interesting, this is their graphic from this year, but I got this information from Peg Seminario, who used to do health and safety for the AFL-CIO. And she remembers this guy, George MacDonald, at a health and safety conference in the late 80s, making what she called an impassioned call for a day of action, taking off his black sock and tying it around his arm, and actually calling for a general strike to recognize the harm that work was doing to people. So inspired by that, Lynn Williams, who was then a Canadian, but president of the Steelworkers Union, and somebody else from the AFL CIO Health and Safety Committee took the idea to the leadership. It ended up on Peg's doorstep and to explore the idea. And she knew that Canadian unions had just started the day of mourning and realized also that April 28th was the anniversary of their federal health and safety OSHA law taking effect. So they came up with the term Workers' Memorial Day for both remembering and a call to action, and thought about Mother Jones, who had been a union organizer at the turn of the 1900s to the the 1800s to the 1900s, and her phrase of pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living, which they modified to mourn for the dead and fight for the living, sometimes fight like hell for the living. It went through various things, and their first Workers' Memorial Day happened in 1989. Since then, they're on their 32nd year of reports with details about national and state activities, the lack of enforcement, the consequences, and they work with something called the National COSH Network around a day or a week. So this COSH network is a community occupational safety and health groups. I'm on their advisory committee. And they have done an amazing job, far beyond whatever I've seen in Canada, of producing materials. So this week, they have a full week. There's this Dirty Dozen report. There are all kinds of local events. There are tools for people. They have actually a Killed at Work database and a map that goes with it. And all kinds of events are held across the country over the week. And at the national level, perhaps because there's a Democratic administration, and a woman called Tanya Ford is now working at OSHA, they actually have this a workers' memorial wall that's on the OSHA website with pictures of workers who died in this last year. And they got the president to issue a statement recognizing the day and saying about its importance. In the UK, a guy called Tommy Hart brought it over from the US in '92, and the campaign was championed by the Hazards folks, introduced this purple forget-me-not ribbon. Some of you may know Rory O'Neill, who's been really important in making that happen as well, and getting it spread not just to the unions, but to the health and safety authorities in the UK. And my friend Mick Holder just sent around this picture that was taken in a community called Waltham Forest today. And this is part of the statement that the Hazards Group put out today, reminding us that nobody should die to make for a living, and that bad jobs still kill someone somewhere every 6 seconds every day. The Hazards Group also has got this really interesting online thing about work-related injuries, illnesses, and deaths, with a whole lot of material about COVID, and pointing out, as Nora's going to be talking about, that there are no records, or very hard to get records, of the number of workers who died because of COVID, even if their job put them at high risk of that happening. And so they're talking about estimates and things like that. And they're also talking about what employers did not have to report. So there's a link to a spreadsheet if people are interested. Rory also works for the International Trade Union Confederation, which took up the idea in 1996 and started setting annual themes. And this year it's using the ILO's new fundamental right, or recognition of a fundamental right to a safe and healthy work environment. And that happened in June of '22 after a campaign by unions in particular that the Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work was changed to include a safe and healthy work environment as a fundamental principle, and hopefully the Canadian government will actually sign on to this. So the ILO itself in 2001 decided to call this a World Day for Safety and Health at Work, made it an official day in the UN system because it's part of the UN in 2002, and again has pointing out that all their ILO member states, which include Canada, have an obligation to respect, promote, and realize in good faith this fundamental right to a safe and healthy work environment. For those of you who want to see what's happening around the world, this just gives a clue. This 28april.org is a joint project of the Hazards Campaign and the ITUC. And on Twitter, there's all kinds of things going on from there around the world. I was spotting things from Mozambique, from the Philippines, South America, all kinds of stuff. So this didn't quite work, but so my last slide here is just a reminder of the song that a stevedore on the northwest coast of the States wrote, called "We Just Come to Work Here, We Don't Come to Die." I've added "or get sick or injured," and I'm thinking. I've just been reflecting about how it's timed for thinking about canaries, not just candles, that we're all still canaries in the workplace. This Mother Jones quote, "The mourn or pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living," sticks with me. And I actually have this t-shirt, which came out of Windsor, the Windsor Occupational Safety and Health Group, many years ago, about the, with using the slogan from the song. I won't play you the song right now, but there will be a link to it in the PDF. And maybe we can even play it at the end. Who knows, Val? And information about it is at that link. So without further ado, then, I'm hoping that Nora is here. And